video, I want to talk about why I love buying third-party games on the Nintendo Switch. I know most of these third-party games you can buy elsewhere, whether we're talking about the PC, the PS4, or the Xbox One, but here's why I love buying third-party games on the Nintendo Switch. First of all, you may be thinking to yourself, the main reason I want to buy a lot of third-party games on my Nintendo Switch is because for the portability of the system, but in fact, you would be wrong. That's not really the case, and that's not why I like buying third-party games on the Nintendo Switch. That's partly the reason. It is nice to have your games on the go, and it's pretty much, when you buy a third-party game on the Nintendo Switch, you're pretty much getting a double-edged sword, because you're getting pretty much two versions of the game, where elsewhere you're pretty much just getting one version of the game since you're stuck at home. So that is one benefit of buying third-party games on the Nintendo Switch. But the main reason I love buying third-party games on the Nintendo Switch so much, and why I have so many third-party games, is the fact that I love the fact that a lot of these third-party games run so well on the Nintendo Switch, and on top of that, I love seeing what developers have to do to the game to make the game run on the Nintendo Switch, because as you guys already know, with the Nintendo Switch is even less powerful than the base Xbox One and PS4 that came out in 2013, so you can see it's underpowered. It's not that much underpowered. It's not like the Wii U versus PS4 and Xbox One. No. It's definitely much better than that situation, but even so, it's still underpowered enough where a lot of these third-party games just can't play at 1080p 60 frames per second. We usually get some type of trade-off, whether it's graphics going down to like 900p, 720p with 60 frames per second, or whether we go to 1080p, but then the developer says 30 frames per second, or in some cases with some games like Darksiders that came out a couple of weeks ago, we have Darksiders actually has a toggle in the game. Do you want quality on your game, or do you want performance? You can choose and pick there, and that's what some developers are doing. They're giving the consumers a choice with graphics or frame rate resolution on the Nintendo Switch. And there's something for me personally that's so satisfying seeing games run on a small tablet, which you would normally think would not run these games, because the power inside the Nintendo Switch is definitely a mobile chipset, the Tegra X1, and the Tegra X1 is pretty outdated at this point. It came out in 2015, so to see modern day games that would normally work on a PS4, Xbox One, or a PC run on the Nintendo Switch, something just really tickles me the wrong way. And it's actually funny. I know a lot of people out there right now are probably laughing at me saying, you're wasting your time with this because, oh, why would you want to play an inferior version of a game? That is true. Why would I want to play an inferior version of a game when the PS4, Xbox One, and of course the PCs have much better graphically looking games, and performance-wise, they definitely have better versions of these games. But sometimes, also with some of these Nintendo Switch ports, you're not really getting a much more dumbed-down version. You're getting all the features, and in some cases, with some of these third-party games, you're almost getting a one-to-one spot-on version of the game, and they pretty much have to do little to no sacrifices to get them to work on the Nintendo Switch, and that's something I like about third-party games. I just love it. If maybe the Nintendo Switch was much more of a traditional console, you put it down in front of the TV and you play your games, maybe I'd be less impelled to actually go out and buy a lot of third-party games for the Nintendo Switch. But for me personally, there's something so exciting to see what they have to do to get these games to run on a handheld tablet type device that has a mobile chipset, the Tegra X1, with I think 4 gig of RAM, which 4 gig of RAM nowadays is kind of small when you compare the PS4 and the Xbox One, and of course a PC. So that's actually quite brilliant. And another reason that I like buying my third-party games on the Nintendo Switch, you probably already know this if you look at my channel and look what I talk about all the time. Mostly I like Nintendo. I've been a Nintendo fanboy. I can safely admit I am a Nintendo fanboy. What else do you expect? I just grew up with Nintendo. I love Nintendo. I love everything about Nintendo, and Nintendo speaks me the right way. I love a lot of their franchises, and since I already have a lot of my investments in the Nintendo ecosystem, most of the time I want all my games to stay in the Nintendo ecosystem, so that's also partially why I buy a lot of third-party games on my Nintendo Switch, whereas other platforms I usually buy their first-party titles exclusively, and then outside of the first-party titles, unless the games are really heavily focused multiplayer games, game, then I normally buy it on the Nintendo Switch, and that's where all my games are. But there is something about third-party games on the Nintendo Switch that I love that much, and that's why I buy mostly third-party games on the Nintendo Switch. Now, of course, it won't be every third-party game. There are some instances where if a game just runs too bad on the Nintendo Switch, where there has been a couple of third-party games that just run absolute garbage on the Nintendo Switch, then of course I'm not going to buy it on there. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, I'll buy a game that's 720p that only plays at 20 frames per second. No, and it's missing a lot of content. No, that's not actually the case. I will end up buying it on something else because I don't want to play a game that's too inferior to the other versions of the game. Whether I think the Nintendo Switch is a cool concept, I like seeing games run on it, no, that will not fly for me. Even if a game runs confidently on the Nintendo Switch and it's a very good looking version of a game, but if they're missing content, that will actually make me not want to buy the game on the Nintendo Switch. So there are some instances you can see where I just flat out will not buy a third-party version of a game on the Nintendo Switch if it's on another platform. But for the most part, if you guys already didn't know this, like I said, I buy most of my games on the Nintendo Switch, whether it's first-party IPs, third-party IPs, indies. Indies obviously make the most sense on the Nintendo Switch because the portability of the Nintendo Switch, and those are small games, small bite-sized games, so of course that makes much more sense. But there you go. There's why I love buying third-party games on the Nintendo Switch. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.